heading into law school.
You know, Northwestern University School of Law really likes students that have had some work experience. And so you might want to make sure that you sort of look at the schools that you're interested in, so that working sometimes is a path to the school of choice. Yeah. So it's a good choice to make, and sometimes, particularly depending on what you're interested in.
Today's market is very difficult for new graduates from law school. The statistics aren't great for finding a job right out of school. And when you have a resume builder that includes, when you have a resume that includes past work experience, I think it helps tremendously. It did for me. Like MacKenzie, I took some time off. I took 6 years off prior to law school after graduating from undergraduate, and worked in the nonprofit sector. And in my particular area of law, in matrimonial and family law, it, I think, provides me an excellent base to, conduct client counseling and to be an excellent advocate for, in particular, female clients for my practice area. But not only. It just allows you to have a more global perspective when you begin your career.
Now, let's say somebody wants to go to law school and they don't have a stellar background. Let's say they've got some issues that happened perhaps during their juvenile years. Would that prevent them from going to law school, or are there some other barriers that perhaps would come up later that they'd have to face?
Well, one of the things that law schools do is they ask you to tell us about yourself and include any arrests you might have had or problems with the law, and so that we know who you are, who you are as a person. We can make a decision whether or not we want to invite you to law school. And that's why you have an opportunity to explain things that might have happened in your past. You might have been hanging with the wrong group, and you got involved, and suddenly you've got a record. Well, that doesn't prevent you from going to law school, and whether or not you become a lawyer depends on the state bar that you're in. In Illinois, we have character and fitness, which evaluates every person that applies to be a lawyer. And typically, even if you've got something in your background that maybe you're not proud of, they'll want to know that you were upfront about that you disclosed it on your application to law school, and that you disclose that information on your application to become a lawyer for the state bar. And as long as you disclose it and you've been able to show that you've turned yourself around, in many cases you won't have a problem being a lawyer. They'll look at it and they'll ask you about it and they'll vet it and try to determine if you've got good character now. And then you're in good shape. You get into problems more likely if you try to hide it and hold it back, or you tell half the story or only part of the story, or you try to act like it never happened and hope they don't find out.
So the best thing is just to be honest up front about what has happened in your past. And
absolutely. That's the best advice, Gilda.
What about working during law school? Anybody, or would you recommend just studying? I mean, it is rigorous. It takes a lot of concentration, a lot of time. What are your recommendations?
I only worked in the summer during law school. Both of my summers, I interned and clerked at the firm that eventually hired me right out of school. And I think that's an excellent thing to do to kind of form your pathway towards employment at the end of the school year. I did know many people who worked during the school year. My second year, I actually participated in a work-study program that allowed for a tuition waiver. I was a teaching assistant and somewhat of a mini professor, if you will, for another program, an undergraduate program at Northern Illinois University, where I went to law school, in their women's studies program. And it was a great way to help pay for school, and it allowed me to kind of maintain perspective on life a little bit also, along with all the extracurricular activities and the things that are available inside the law school. You can kind of end up in a little bubble, and working while in school allows you to keep your head above water.
Perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion? I'm sorry, MacKenzie.
I agree. I mean, I worked throughout my second and third year. I was a law clerk for the partner that I still work for now, which is, I mean, we're kind of lucky in that sense. I think it's a little bit anomalous. But for me, in the practice area that I wanted to go into, I knew that the best path was to just start practicing and try to get as involved as possible to learn as much as I could about the area of law that I'm in, which is probate. Other people that I know that wanted to do government work, they did externships at the state's attorney's office or with the Attorney General's office. So I think it really depends on what your goals are. And if your goal is, for instance, to work at a very large law firm, then your priority needs to be in the top of your class and to get on law review and to get, very good grades. Not to say that you shouldn't always try to get good grades, but if your priority is, to work at a certain nonprofit, then you need to, make sure that they know who you are. You want to get face time. You want them to see that you're valuable to them. And the best way to do that is, to work for free. And then they can.
Yeah. So activities during school, during law school, are important. Whether it be work, whether it be moot court, whether it be some sort of other extracurricular activities. Would you guys agree?
Very important. I mean, if you're going to school during the day, full time, the ABA, the American Bar Association, and your law school will have rules on whether during your first semester in law school you can work, and typically it's no. And then they look to limit after that first semester, they try to limit your hours generally to no more than 20 hours of work during the week, or less, depending on, the particular law school and the rules of the American Bar Association. But my advice is that there's some great advantages to working, particularly if you can work as part-time for a law firm or a lawyer. It helps you network, it helps you get involved in the practice and get to know people that may ultimately hire you when you finish law school. If you're going to school part-time, if you have the benefit of working during the day and going to school at night, well, then you're expected to work. And then you really just sort of added to you've sort of shifted your lifestyle because you're going to be working at night while working at day while going to school at night. But extracurricular activities make a big difference in your ability to experience new things. You can try areas of law, like Julie worked with the women's law group. And then try things out. You can work for a veterans law clinic, or you can work for a fair housing clinic, or any number of things that sort of you can test the waters.
So just because you go to law school doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a practicing lawyer either.
That's true.
Are there some other areas that you could use your degree?
Absolutely. Businesses particularly like the lawyers because they like the way they think, which is different than if you'd just gone to business school alone, because you have a different insight in some of the ramifications of the decisions that are made, and which you've got to balance the potential benefits of the business decision against the legal ramifications of those also similar decisions. Politics, go to law school and go into politics. You may not practice law. Lots of possibilities.
Law school is not cheap. We've talked about that. What are some of the range in terms of tuitions that a student can expect for law school?
If you went to a state school, it wouldn't be unusual to find a tuition probably in the $20,000 to $25,000 a year range, or maybe a little less. At a private school, it's more like $35,000 to $40,000 a year, and that's just tuition. So then you've got to factor in your room and board, other costs, books, and those things might be beyond that. So it really points to the importance of being prepared for law school, doing well on your grades in college, so you can get a good undergraduate GPA, a good LSAT score, and then vie for scholarships and grants so that it can help reduce some of the costs of law school. We've got a program where you could, if you participate in the undergraduate diversity mock trial competition and you're in the first place team, you get a $15,000 partial tuition waiver. First place advocate also gets $15,000. So we've had a student, Anthony Sam, who won both and then came to our school with a $30,000, 1/3 of his law school was paid for. And he's been a real benefit to our school because he's won national tournaments at the legal level as well.
You don't necessarily have to come to law school with all your financial aid figured out either. I mean, the government is nice enough to offer us some standard financial aid for law students. You get a straight, flat loan amount. When I went to school, it was probably less than it is now. But because you were an adult graduate student considered an independent from your parents at that point, there is a guaranteed amount of money. And then there are other loan options through private banks and things like that. But while you're in school, there are always opportunities for financial aid. Like I mentioned previously, I earned a tuition waiver by working for another program within the university. I also won a scholarship, a smaller one. It was $5,000 from the Illinois Women's Bar Foundation because of my public interest work, quite frankly. And the more that you do, the more of a diverse individual that you become, the more opportunities come your way in terms of financial support and other opportunities for your future.
And public interest law. You might find that there's some deferrals or waivers of some of your tuition because you chose maybe a public interest area. So you should look at a lot of those possibilities while in law school. And then the nice thing about the loans is that those loans are deferred while you're in law school until after you graduate, 6 months or so after.
MacKenzie, does it matter what law school you go to?
It does, in the sense that I think that the clear understanding you have of where you want to be after law school should guide how you choose which law school to eventually go to. I agree with Rory that every candidate should apply to reach schools that they're pretty confident they'll get into, and then some lower tiered schools, because the benefit of applying to a range is that you might get into a reach school, but they might, you might have to pay full tuition, whereas you can get into a school that's lower on the rankings, but they might give you $15,000 a year, and that's a huge consideration. And so aside from the financial benefits of possibly going to a lower ranked school, you need to look and see what the school offers that you want to be involved in. So, schools offer legal clinics. And so if there's a legal clinic at one school that really interests you because that's the exact area of law you want to go into, then you should consider that school more so than, perhaps in a school that's more elite but doesn't have any of those opportunities. So I think that the greater your understanding of what your goals are, the more you can pinpoint that to the school that embodies or embraces your interests, the more likely you are to be successful once you leave.
And what about law school outside of the state? What impact does that have, Rory, if you decide you want to go to a law school outside of the state?
Well, many of the same ways to prepare for law school you would do, but you might want to pay a little bit more attention to the law forums that the Law School Admission Council provides in your area, where you can see a variety of law schools. You can talk to them. You can find out what they're about. You can utilize the online searches. And then think about where you might want to practice, because it sometimes helps to go to law school in the area where you ultimately want to practice.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys for participating in our panelists today. I think that you've given our potential students, some wonderful information. I want to thank our audience for participating and looking and watching us, and good luck to you. Thank you.